Hello everybody, and welcome to more science fiction. As you can hear from the weather outside, it's pretty awful, so I do apologise for the sound quality. It's raining really hard, uncharacteristically for the time of year, but it is what it is. So we're going to have a look at another short story, a science fiction story. Now this one's a little bit more relevant to you because it was written in this kind of setting. Now this is a story from a writing prompt. Now, writing prompt is what we used the other day where we had that random story generator where a random title was generated and somebody had to write a story around it. Now, this was done in a writing class. The title was generated and I was told, it's not possible to write a story around this title. So we thought, okay, let's try and prove that wrong. So we set ourselves, myself and my writing partner, Seth, 2 hours to try and come up with a story around this premise, around this title, that was actually relevant to people today. So there's a couple of themes embedded inside this story that I think most students, especially at your age, are going to be able to relate to. You decide. Also, I think it's going to be more of a simple, fluffy, fun story than the one we had yesterday. Yesterday we looked at Isaac Asimov, and the story was, final question, was a lot deeper. It was about the meaning of life, the meaning of the universe, rebooting the universe, starting over again, the birth of humanity, the birth of all creation in the universe. And this is something that's the holy grail for science fiction writers. The idea that humans and machines combine together in this transhumanism utopia, and eventually we evolve technologically to become the universe itself. God created man in his image is this thing that science fiction writers have been inspired by for generations. And of course, it's the cornerstone of all philosophy. You know, what is it to be human and what is the universe? Combining the two together, it's a pretty obvious choice, and Asimov did it brilliantly, masterfully. So that's what we looked at yesterday. This one is not so deep. I won't go into too much of the introduction of what the story is about. I'll read the story to you and you can make your own minds up. But anyway, here's the story, and then there's some questions for you to answer, and I want you to look at what the themes of the story really are. Okay, now this story is from a novel called Blips. Not quite sure where it is inside the book. To find it. It's currently loading. Now, it's on the website, it's all free, it's all there. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to do this, am I? Okay. Right. Okay, this story is from a collection called Blips. The idea of the short story collection is, again, inspired by Isaac Asimov. One of my favourite books is I, Robot. And what that does is it takes the concept of short stories and puts them inside a narrative arc. And it does that by having the main character being Susan Calvin. Now, Susan Calvin is a robo-psychologist, a scientist who, over the years, has developed robot psychology. What it does is it puts her in front of a reporter who is putting together a story about her life, and she's relating stories that she remembers about the evolution of robots. So we start off with the first serious robot. In the story, they have to have a human operator. They're not trusted to operate on their own because we're scared of them. And then it shows how the positronic brain evolves and develops, the laws of robotics, become built into their programming. It shows how the robots eventually become gigantic computers that take over the world in a good way. Ultimately, they get rid of war, famine, and they quietly take over, and humanity sort of loses part of themselves, but also we gain something from it. Now, I don't necessarily agree with his politics. Asimov, I don't believe in that. I believe that machines would be programmed by horribly flawed human beings and therefore can't be intrinsically perfect. I don't think humanity should ever give up control to even to another person. I think there's a built-in danger for anything like that, and I think we see that around the world now. You know, the encroaching hand of socialist fascism is coming, and the more we give up power, the more power they will take from us. And I think that was either a warning that Asimov was trying to make, or he was making a point that there's nothing we can do about it, give up and accept it. You'd have to read his work yourself and come to your own conclusions. But I liked what he did in terms of narrative structure, so I was inspired by that to put together a collection of work of my own, where we had a single narrative arc. So, this is my take on it. The Glass Spaceship. So that was the title that was the writing prompt. The Glass Spaceship. He was a strikingly handsome man. He had a powerful lean physique and a proud square jawline. His piercing blue eyes peered out into the infinite darkness of space, the endless black canvas upon which the universe itself was painted. But it wasn't the universe, the place of endless possibilities and the cradle of all creation, that held his attention. He was staring at his own reflection, gazing lovingly at the image of himself as it gazed lovingly back at him. He was veiled only in a towel, since he had stepped just moments earlier from the shower. He stared at his wonderfully taut physique, casually flexing his broad, strong muscles and grinning to himself proudly. She slipped elegantly from their bed and stepped up behind him, her bare feet tapping gently on the glass floor beneath. She sipped on a cocktail, a bubbling concoction from some other planet, far off in a distant corner of the galaxy. Perhaps it was waiting to be conquered by his mighty glass spacecraft, the ultimate vessel in the whole, complete and entire universe. She slipped forwards to join him by the edge of their lounge. She was wrapped only in a bedsheet torn rudely from their shared bed, and looked at him with a warmth in her eyes that fell short only of the love he felt for himself. Their mutual gaze widened his self-satisfied smirk. Her hands caressed the flesh of his broad and muscular shoulder. He could smell the scent of sweat on her as she pressed her warm, soft body tightly up against his own. No matter how many times they made love, it was never enough. The closeness of her filled his mind with thoughts of her flawless, perfect, naked body. He turned to look at her, his face tensing as he contemplated what was next for them, where to go, what to see, who to conquer, to cook, to eat. Maybe we should head to the Fusion system, he said. I hear there's a planet there where the wind blows across fields of wild crystal flowers, making music so beautiful that it could make a grown man cry. His voice was deep and heavy, dripping with masculine authority. And I hear the population is made up of tiny green people who have no weapons. We could arrive for breakfast and own the planet by lunchtime. A vicious smile formed on her soft red lips. He looked away from her beautiful visage to once again stare out into the vastness of space, and he smiled inwardly. It was all so perfect. He had the universe at his fingertips and the means to take anything he wanted at any time he chose to take it. And even better than all that, he had her. He looked back to her, to this woman that he had come to deeply love over the last few months. He had met her while attacking an outpost populated by horribly unprepared little purple aliens who tasted oddly like chicken. She had been in their capital city at the time, destroying it with an ultra-mega laser cannon, and what was left smelled very much like the grease trap in the kitchen of a shop specializing in fried poultry and low standards. She was brutal, morally bereft, totally lacking in empathy, and she was beautiful to boot. To him, she was perfection taken form in human flesh. I could eat breakfast, he said thoughtfully, as if contemplating something of incredible importance, such as what horribly sweet things he might be able to ram into a toaster. Computer, prepare a course for the Fusion system. Take us to the planet of the singing flowers. The computer spoke with a voice like a whisper breathed over an infinitely delicate wine glass. Course is laid in. Prepare for hyperjump. Total journey time will be 17 minutes. 17 minutes, he said thoughtfully. She said thoughtfully. She put her drink down on a glass shelf and smiled at him flirtatiously. I'm going to step outside then. I'll be back soon though. Her eyes locked into his, and something unspoken passed between them. I promise, she purred seductively. Good idea. I should really step out myself. He frowned just a little and added, it's just, you step out a lot. Sometimes it feels like you're hardly ever here these days. He took a long look out into the void, contemplated something even more important than ramming things into toasters. "What time is it where you are?" She admonished, wagging an erect forefinger. For a moment, it was as if sadness washed over her. "Let's not ask questions like that. It'll spoil the romance. You're Captain Joper, dashing space adventurer, and I'm Princess Lucy, vicious destroyer of worlds. Let's just leave it at that, shall we? We know who we are in here, and that's all that matters. Outside is outside." He sighed and nodded. Her fingers traced over the bony ridge of his heavy, powerful, masculine jawline, and she smiled up at him. Her own fingers joined them, and he searched until he found the odd little ridge at the top of his neck. She stepped back and did the same to hers. "I'll see you soon, Princess." At the same time, they pressed down on the buttons that felt as if they were made from their own flesh. A bright flash lit up inside his mind. The glass spaceship flickered, glowed a brilliant white, and was suddenly gone, leaving little Johnny Harper sitting in his bedroom. He carefully unplugged the simulation patch from the base of his skull. He felt as if he'd been ripped from a dream, although the memory was perfect, perhaps clearer than the memories he formed in the outside world. It took him a moment to adjust, his brain reeling for a few seconds, trying to make sense of the sudden shift from one reality to the other. His small bedroom was a tip, as every teenage boy's was. It smelled of sweat and apathy and was strewn with plates of cheap convenience food scattered amidst paper cups once filled with over-sugared drinks. The smell wasn't quite appalling, but it was getting there. He hefted himself up, wheezing at the effort as he hoisted his flabby, unhealthy body from the chair, pulling it free of the metal contacts that put him into the perfect artificial reality of his favourite game, the glass spaceship, the perfect universe that was his to explore. It was a place where nobody picked on him, where none of the kids at virtual school shouted at him to lose weight, to go outside more, or to make some real friends. It was his reality, and it was everything he wanted it to be. In the game, he had real friends. In the game, he had a reality more solid, more meaningful than anything he'd ever encountered in the outside world. He had a life exploring the galaxy in his mighty spacecraft. He had her, a wondrous girlfriend, a lovely princess with flowing golden hair, alluring lips and perfect figure. Inside the game, even an awkward, lonely teenage boy like him could be anything they wanted to be. In the games, everyone could be whoever they felt that they really were. The games were better than anything, at least better than anything he had anywhere else. He made his way from the dull, dingy bedroom along the landing to the bathroom, but it was too late. Somebody pushed past him and reached the door before he could grab at it first. "Mum," he grumbled, thinking only of getting back to the ship, back to his princess. "I really need to pee." "I need to go too," she sneered, glaring at him accusingly. "It's not all about you, you know. There are other people living in this dreadful house." "Sorry," he said, and turned his eyes down to the ground. He wished he could shrink away into nothing. He wished he could just be Captain Joper again. Captain Joper never had to wait in line for the bathroom. "It's just that there's someone waiting for me that I have to get back to. We're all busy," his mother told him with a shrill voice, a voice made hoarse from a great deal of shouting. "I don't want that rubbish taken out. I've told you twice already and it's still here. Before you do anything else, you go down and empty those bins." "But I'm playing my games," he mumbled to himself pathetically. Captain Joper never had to take the rubbish out, which was fortunate since his rubbish was frequently the smouldering remains of a planet littered with the skeletons of tasty little purple aliens. A faint attention-seeking bark emanated from the kitchen downstairs, dulled by a thick-walled stairwell. She looked him up and down with that look of disapproved disgust that he hated so much. "I'm playing games too." "You play games, Mum?" She snorted a sarcastic laugh. "Of course I play the games. Everyone plays the games. What do you think I do to relax? I have to unwind from a long day spent cleaning yours and your father's dirty underwear. That's even less fun than it sounds, I can promise you that. When I was contemplating what I wanted to do when I grew up, scrubbing your crusty pants wasn't at the top of the list, you know. I used to like the French one about the murder mystery, but now I play a space one where you have to conquer enough worlds to earn yourself the ultimate prize, a huge glass spaceship. I have a perfect little galaxy to explore, and it's fun to make special friends online who destroy planets with me. I can have fun like I never had with your father. And also, I like not having to wash anyone's filthy, stained underclothes." He looked away thoughtfully. So she's playing in the glass spaceship universe too. A horrible, terrible thought flashed through his mind. Could it really be a coincidence that his mother was taking a toilet break at the same time that he and his girlfriend were. You could be anyone you wanted to be inside the games, and if you earned enough points, you could look anywhere you wanted to look. Who would his mother choose to be? What might she look like in the games? Surely it couldn't be, it just couldn't, could it? His thoughts were interrupted again by the sound of barking, this time with a little more urgency. And while you're emptying the bins, go and feed Princess before she starves to death. Woof. So this is a story that relies on metaphors and symbolism. The glass spaceship, what we do is we begin off with this, this alternate reality where there's a huge glass spaceship, a powerful warship with huge weapons, and it's a perfect universe with a perfect captain who loves himself completely. But of course, we then get the twist and bait reveal that really it's just a little boy in his bedroom fantasizing all of this. Now, in other stories, 50 years ago, it would have been a fantasy. He would have been reading about it. He would have maybe been watching it on television or in a movie. But in the future, in science fiction, we could literally make this his reality by using virtual reality, by making some kind of video game where this appears totally real to him. So then he wakes up and we find out that really he's immersed in this fantasy because he's the opposite of that. He has made himself his ideal version of himself, this heroic captain who's perfect looking, who's got this perfect body because his body's horrendous, doesn't look after himself. And it's all a symbol of his failure masked over with this virtual success. Then we go further and take his mother and we make this suggestion that, of course, in these kind of video games and online, anybody can be anybody they want to be. So it's taking the idea of fantasy and extending it to horrendous degrees as a warning that what you see online, what you see on the internet, and what you see in people's fantasies is not reality. It's a version of reality, it's a take on reality that isn't necessarily to be taken at face value. So the story here really is a warning about what you see online. So we're taking this very real thing that people have to deal with, this reality of online fraud, where people pretend to be someone they're not. And we make a point about it by putting little Johnny Harper into a relationship with his own mother. And that's done as a joke. Now I didn't see your faces as I was reading the story, but when I've done this in class, there's usually this sort of sickened laughter, and it gets a little more of a ripple around the classroom. And then you can always hear somebody at the back going, "Oh no, it's his mum!" And yeah, it's pretty awful. But the point here, and when you make a story, a short story, it has to make a point. We have to make an emotional connection with the audience. And the best way to do that sometimes is shock value. So we take the captain and we play an old game of bait and twist, bait and switch. So you've got the idea that who he is, and then we switch around everything you know and turn it into an artificial reality. And then we have the final reveal that, these two people are together in the spaceship. And of course, it's a bit of a stretch, the coincidence that they would meet, but also it's not that much of a stretch because essentially we are a lot like our parents. We might have the same interests. So it's kind of a story that makes that point. It's not a fun story in as much as, you're looking at something that could happen to you. But it does happen. People take fantasy too far. Now, when you sink further and further into fantasy, we have a problem with reality, and we see this a lot. I do a lot of podcasts with these guys who I think take movies and TV way too seriously. They're arguing all the time about the value of this compared to this in terms of films. This film was better than this film. Star Wars is better than Star Trek, and these guys will argue tooth and nail. And you think, okay, that's fine. As a hobby, talking about movies is fine. But when it takes over your reality, what are you covering up for? What is really missing? And we've got a world at the moment where, it's pretty screwed up. The world we see around us is a mess. I've never seen the world look worse than it does now. We're living through a historical event of the worst possible kind. And it's dying down now. It's dying down. But the damage is not going to be repaired in our lifetimes. We're really not. And there's going to be ramifications of this, and we're going to be living through it. It's pretty dark. And a lot of people are retreating into fantasy. Now, I've got a friend who he's bought a motorcycle, a 1,000cc motorcycle to ride around the world. Now, I've been trying to tell him that's not the right bike. You need something smaller, you need something lighter, you need more prep, you need to learn how bikes work, you need to learn how to ride a motorbike. So he's bought the biggest, most powerful machine he can find without actually being able to ride it. He's never ridden it before. Doesn't know if he's ever going to be able to travel, doesn't know if he's ever going to ride the bike, because he's living in a fantasy. He's not interested in reality. He's so miserable that he just wants to do something else, something where he's expressing his need to get away from this reality. And I see this a lot, and it's dangerous. Because the more we invest in our fantasies, the less we're dealing with reality. And a lot of people are retreating from that right now. And I'm sure a lot of you know what I'm talking about and probably do it yourselves. You've probably got favorite YouTube channels instead of best friends. A lot of you are going to be like this. A lot of you are watching anime or following a K-pop star because reality is not so great at the moment. And many of you have not been outside for way, way too long, not been relating to your friends. And as teenagers, that isn't healthy. But you have to be careful about reality. Reality is reality, and it's happening all around us. And you've got to be able to deal with it. And it worries me that too many people these days are retreating into this fantasy that's destructive. So be careful with that. And this story is a warning about sticking to reality, because eventually reality is going to come looking for you, and eventually you cannot escape it. It's here. You might not like it, and you might want to pretend it's something you're not. In America, they might want to pretend that women are men and men are women, but the reality is coming for them. It doesn't care about your opinion. The truth doesn't care what you think. It's just the truth. And there's nothing that's going to change that. So, I've left you some questions. Let's have a look at those.